today, you know, got one around how my people are benefit bludgers, that we don't deserve anything from the government, that I need to go back to my marae, which I get often told, that I need to go to Māori radio. I'm assuming they mean iwi radio. Yeah.
Kia ora, Māni.
Kia ora.
This is your first year presenting after years of reporting in the field. What's it been like transitioning from a reporter to a presenter?
I never set out in my journalism career wanting to be a presenter. The opportunity came up and I took it. And yeah, it's a whole different game. It's you have this amazing amount of, I don't want to say power, but you're in this. I remember the first day I did it, and I think the first day on my show though, because we'd only done like a run through, when I went to go press the button to like put the mic on, the theme was playing, and I didn't know that that was the real thing.
So you thought it was?
I thought it was just like a practice, like, oh, we're just testing it to see if it's going, and then like I was like about 5 seconds late into the intro, they're like, it's you, and I was like, press the record, you know, the live button for the first time, and it was all a rush, and I've never listened back to that because I don't want to.
You know, everyone's going to listen back to that now.
Yeah, I know, but apparently it wasn't noticeable. But I mean, it's so different. You have this. It's so much. It's fun because you're live and there's anything could happen. They could say anything. You have to be on the whole time, and because I've got such an amazing producer, I feel really safe in that studio. And it sounds like I use power and fun, but it is so much fun, and you have this control of. Directing the narrative or directing the interview in a way, and the interviews are so short that you get to be really quick and fiery and, you know, a little bit cheeky and kind of give your talent a little bit of stick, and I love that because that is the beauty of live radio, and I didn't think I would like it as much as I did, if I'm honest.
And you started presenting the week of lockdown. What was that like? Did you feel lots of pressure because it was such an intense time for the country?
There was a lot of questions around whether the show would even go ahead because I was fresh, no presenting experience other than Te Wānui. And so we decided to go through with it. Mm-hmm. I remember on the first day, on the Monday, that was the day that Level 4 was being announced. And during the show, there was a live broadcast, I think at 12:30. And so we had, I think, 2 cut-ins in the first show. And it was like baptism by fire, you know. I had no idea what I was doing, clearly, because I missed my cue. Yeah. But because you're on this adrenaline, and once I kind of told myself in that studio, you are communicating, well, probably one of the most historic times in our life to New Zealand, or to people who listen to RNZ, which is, you know, a significant amount of people. And as soon as I broke it down to like, that is your role as a broadcaster, as a public service broadcaster, you are relaying information that people need to know clearly, precisely, and in a timely manner. And that's your role, and that's how I approached it in that first lockdown. Yeah.
One thing you have brought to Radio New Zealand and your presenting is your reo Māori. And there's an incredible interview with you and Dame Edna when she says to you in English, I don't know how to express how I'm feeling in English. And you say to her, that's okay, speak in Te Reo Māori, and you say that in Te Reo, and you have a conversation in Te Reo Māori and it's seamless. And then you break out of the reo again and you explain to listeners, this is what she said, and you continue the interview. How did that feel, being able to do that on national radio?
At the time I didn't realise the significance of it because, as you know, it's something that we do in our interviews, because we do a lot of, that's our job, we do Māori news, and so we interview Māori, and that happens a lot, and it's happened a lot in my career with my talent, and, you know, I always say that they can speak reo or English, but for it to be broadcast on a somewhat prime time, midday-ish time slot was I didn't realise until after it went to air, and I think you tweeted it, and it went, it got a lot of traction, that I really kind of started to understand what that meant, because it gave a platform that other broadcasters couldn't provide for someone as amazing as Dame Nada. And you have to remember, Dame Nada's the one who got fired for the way she greeted when she was working at Telecom.
So how could you not, right? How could you not allow her to speak?
How could you not? But also on reflection though, it's that many years ago to 2020, that to me was insane that it was so significant. It shouldn't have been, in my opinion, and that's why it happened so naturally, because for me that should be a normal thing to do. And I think more to that though, it's not only about the reo, and I think, that's a lot of feedback I get is around the both negative and positive around the increased use of te reo Māori. And I always say that that's only one part of having Māori presenters in mainstream spaces, because you are asking questions through a Māori lens. And what I felt was a bit lost was the actual kaupapa of that interview, which was about Oranga Tamariki and Dame Nada's disdain of the Children's Minister at the time, Tracy Martin, of misquoting her and not taking accountability for a report that she should have been taking on recommendations from and dismissing it in a select committee. And that it was the day before that Tracy Martin did that, and no media picked up on that, and we did. And so it gave me an opportunity to air that. And it just happened that because she was so frustrated and angry that she needed te reo Māori to really truly express how she felt.
Is your use of te reo on midday in your intros and everything you do, it's just integrated throughout. Was that a deliberate decision you made before you became the presenter of that show, or did it just happen naturally?
It happened naturally, and the thing obviously that was that I thought about was the name of the show, because there are different ways you can say midday, and obviously consulted with Shannon and Julian Wilcox around the name in which we would give the show, and that's what we landed on. That's the one that I felt flowed the best, and then from then on everything else kind of fell into place. Te wiki o te reo Māori, also we had a huge increase amount of reo used again, more so than usual. And then since then we've kind of stuck with that, because why not? And also I think every Māori Language Week there's always pressure on media organisations of, okay, are you going to keep doing this? And I was like, well, if I'm not going to keep doing it, the shame. And so it was a natural progression to start off with a massive increased use of te reo to more so. And I never consciously sat down and thought, okay, I'm presenting a show now, I'm going to start using heaps of reo. It was a natural thing to do, and was supported to do that.
What kind of feedback have you had to your use of te reo on midday?
A lot of feedback, and not only because of the reo, but because I am Māori in the stories and the interviews that we do. Because I tend to always ask questions of the main stories around how this will impact Māori. Every day I get a negative message, whether that be through a text through to RNZ or my personal email, sometimes my personal phone number, and a lot of those messages talk about how, like today, got one around how my people are benefit bludgers, that we don't deserve anything from the government, that I need to go back to my marae, which I get often told, that I need to go to Māori radio. I'm assuming they mean iwi radio. So, and and I knew that taking this role, I would get that, and I was warned that that would happen, and so it was no surprise. The surprise for me is the consistency of it. It's slowly, it depends on the day. Generally Mondays you get quite a lot of feedback, negative feedback, because over the weekend there may not be much that they haven't got used to you, and so then on the Monday it might be to RNZ listeners who don't like the reo. They kind of get started by it and then start sending in their feedback. And again, you have to remember that the people who are taking the time to send that message in, it's a very small, what you'd hope, a small sector of society. But I also get, on the other hand, I get overwhelmingly positive messages. Not as much. People tend to see negative other than over positive messages. But the positive messages always are so heartfelt, and you get ones around how they've implemented reo into their home because of it, because of your show. And I always either call them or send them back messages. And, you know, and from Pākehā, but also from Māori. And I got like a fangirl moment. Ngāhi Apanui gave me like a big ups when I was interviewing him, and I was, you know, you get compliments, but I was like, yeah, oh, kia ora, thank you for that.
I so know that feeling.
Yeah.
Does the negativity and the constant negative feedback weigh on you at all, and how do you deal with that?
It depends how much sleep I got. Some days it does. But to be honest, it just drives me more. If I see, because I have the text up, if I see a text come through that's negative, I'm like, oh, the next line's going to be all into reo Māori, you know, it's because they need to get on the waka. That is where our country is moving, and you see that every year, ever since I started reporting, and every Māori Language Week, you see that traction be retained. So that's my little response to them.
I guess the negative feedback about your reo is just one aspect or one challenge, I guess, of being a Māori wahine in a mainstream space where lots of our audience are non-Māori, are Pākehā. What are the other challenges that you face, do you think, as a Māori woman working for a mainstream media organisation?
There are many, and they've changed over time. But the one thing that will always remain is that we are always fighting for our narratives to be told by us, for all New Zealanders and for all listeners of RNZ, and that's a balance. And I don't have to fight as much as I used to what I have to do now. But it's a constant issue of how stories are told. Because of being Māori News Director, I should have my eye over all Māori stories. And sometimes some slip through that have been framed in a certain way. And we're in this really privileged position, not necessarily privileged, but we're in this position to help frame narratives and stories in a way that are no longer perpetuating racist stereotypes and narratives, which the mainstream media is and has been responsible for. And we've seen Nana Wana Mahi to come and Parahi for her mahi that she did for stuff in their apology. It's an apology, yeah, it's a start, and there's a lot of mahi to do, and the proof will be in the pudding. And I tweeted to her saying, this is not only going to shift the print landscape, but it will start having ripples within the wider media sector, because now it is on people's mind, and people are more likely now to give you feedback when they don't feel a story is being framed in a certain way. And so that's my responsibility, and I don't take that responsibility lightly, and I never have, to always make sure that our voices are heard, and that the questions that our people need to ask of our public servants, of all of the newsmakers, that they have to answer to us. To the point now, before people come on my show, they ask the producer, or they ask me, okay, so what? It's not a Māori kaupapa, but what Māori question are you going to ask? And I'm like, to me that is a big step, because it's making sure that anyone who comes onto the show, regardless of not they get asked, that they start to think in that way, because we're always an afterthought. And that's why it's important to have us in mainstream, so that we're not an afterthought, that we're at the forefront of any kaupapa.
Well, you weren't always a presenter or a journalist. You spent a year in Kaikohe up north, where you're from. What was that year like, and was it good being back where you're from and your home?
So when I was 10, was it 10? Yeah, I was 10. My whānau from up north, and my whānau in Wellington decided to send me up to go to Kura Kaupapa for a year in Kaikohe. And I'm from Waimati. And so that was a contrast to my upbringing in Wellington, to go and live in Kaikohe. And I think there's many huge things, many things in my life that have contributed to what I do and how I do it and my place in the world. But that was one of the defining moments, because total no reo whatsoever. Chucked in a kura total immersion.
Oh my gosh.
And
what was that like?
Oh, it's a long time ago now. But no, it was pretty exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, at the time, when you're that young, you just kind of go with the flow and you just figure it out. And then, but that gave me a whole new sense, whole new grounding of who I was, who I am, my ngāpuhitanga, and I don't really know how to answer that question.
So you returned to Wellington after Kaikohe. What made you interested in journalism?
So I went to Wellington Girls College, and I had a really amazing media studies teacher there, and she treated us like uni students, and the way she made us think and analyse theories and the media just blew my mind. And it was something I never really, you know, I grew up in a household where we always watched the 6 o'clock news, but we didn't listen to RNZ. You know, it wasn't a huge part of my life. And then so I became really passionate about it at high school. I was also a drama geek, and so it was either one or the other. And I decided to apply to go to broadcasting school. After my first year out of high school, I had a year off and worked, and then and because I left high school when I was 17, and then went to broadcasting school, and I hated it. I hated broadcasting school.
Yeah, I have a question here. Why didn't you like broadcasting school?
There was no Māori input whatsoever to the curriculum. Anytime we wanted to incorporate it into our assignments or into anything, it was challenged. It was a very old school way of learning. And for that I'm grateful, because it gave me a really good foundation. And I do remember after my first year, I went back in the second year and I wanted to leave. And I was ready to leave. And then it wasn't until Coco Solid came and gave us a talk at, she went to broadcasting school, she did TV, and she came and did this amazing cordial with us. And she said she hated it too. And I was like, man, because I just, I knew what I could do with it, and just pretty much just stuck
So
at
she
it.
made you stay?
Yeah, she did.
Wow, okay.
And I've told her that. I'm a few years ago I saw her at an event, and I was like, should I go? Should I go? Should I? I'm like, yeah. And then I told her.
And was RNZ your first media job out of that school?
Yeah, you have to do an internship.
Okay.
And that was my internship.
Okay. So you spent a few years at RNZ, and then you did what lots of RNZers do, is leave and then come back.
Yeah, it has that effect on you.
What's changed since you were last here?
So much has changed. I think around the use of reo is obviously is a key thing, and I think that's something as an organisation we need to push past, and that we've made that step, and now to go further, which is happening and will happen. But I remember getting reprimanded for signing off in Tāmaki Makaurau, something I've talked about in the past, and then so when I left and then came back and saw that was just the norm, I was like, far out, that didn't take long for it to change. Yeah. And so that's been a huge change. Obviously the shift, I feel like, in terms of all the different platforms we have to provide for now, that is a huge difference. And I think that our whole approach is way different to what it was when I started. Yeah.
Have you got a favourite interview from that time, or even since you've been presenting?
Favourite or most memorable?
Most memorable, favourite, one that sticks out to you?
Man, it was one from really early on. And I was doing a piece, series on SIFs, now OT, and they gave me kind of access to go along with social worker in South Auckland for a week, and to go see how they do their job. And it was incredibly, it was an incredible experience. But a follow on from that, I had covered a coroner's inquest into a young 12-year-old girl who committed suicide when she was in OT care. And I sat through the whole inquest, and I was a real junior. I think I'd just come out of my internship, and it was, I'll never forget it, to know what coroner's inquest, if you've been to them or if you've covered them, they go into a huge amount of detail of that person's life and a blow by blow of the whole situation. And so I was I knew so much about this particular case and this particular whānau. After that, I did the SIF series, and then while I did that, I found her whānau, to talk to them, and her father agreed to talk to me and let me into his home. And he had a hard life, and all I could see was that he was committed to making a good life for his kids, who he had back in care with him. And he took the time to take me through all his photo albums of her, talk about how she was the oldest sibling and how much she looked after her siblings and how much she cared for them, and just broke down, and I broke down with him. And it flows on to now, and the amount of stories and cases that we've done into OT and into SIFs at the time, and just the horrific harm that had happened to this whānau, and understanding the whole story. And for me at that point, I knew that it was so important that it was a Māori journalist telling that story. And there were certain parts of it that, you have to be we're really cautious about. We have to wear so many hats when you're a Māori journalist, you have to balance your role as a Māori, as a journalist, as a Ngāpuhi woman. You carry all these hats, and you have to balance so much to know that in yourself you're telling the story for the right reasons. And there's been many times in my career where I have gone against that, and in my puku everything has told me not to do a certain story or to tell a story in a certain way, and when I've gone against that feeling, it hasn't gone well, and it wasn't the right thing to do. And so I think that is something that as journalists, as Māori journalists, we're constantly aware of. And this is not to take away from journalists as a whole. I mean, everyone plays a role and has a really hard job, an important and crucial job. But I do feel like we have to hold so much more. And so, in terms of going back to this young girl, the dad wanted her story to be told, and his story to be told as raw as he possibly could, and laid all bare. Because he didn't want it to happen to anyone else. He didn't want any other child to go through that experience, or any other whānau to go through that experience. And that is the power of storytelling and telling stories in the right way.
What continues to drive you to be a journalist, to be a presenter, to turn up every day and do what you do, given, some of the heavy things we need to report, like you've just mentioned?
Well, what always drives us is our young ones. And you've articulated that recently in your piece about your niece and my daughter and, the younger generation. And, this is something that we talk about often. It's what every Māori you interview, if you ask them that question, that is what they'll say drives you, because it does. Because you want to create a better world for them, because that's what our tupuna have done for us, have paved the way, and every other Māori broadcaster that has paved the way for us to make our job easier, and we're only doing that to make the job easier for the journalists who will come after us. But also to have a world in which we're not perpetuated in the media as these negative stereotypes. And that's shifting. And we are seeing a change, we are seeing a shift. We're not there yet. We've got heaps to do. But that's how I see my role and my responsibility of ensuring that people are made accountable to our people, that we're challenging our own people as well. That's always important, and it's something that we have to do. But that we tell the stories that needs to be told.